And so for our featured program today, Life as an Explorer, Mr. Will Steger. He was born in 1944 here in Richfield. Will Steger is a prominent spokesperson for the understanding and preservation of the Arctic. He's traveled tens of thousands of miles by kayak and dog sled over 50 years, leading teams on some of the most significant polar expeditions in history. Most recently, Steger established the Steger Wilderness Center in Ely, Minnesota, to preserve expedition archives. His Climate Generation, a Will Steger Legacy, is a nonprofit that engages leaders to foster climate literacy and action for a more equitable and sustainable future for all. His writings and photos are widely known and appreciated globally. Some of these photos you'll be seeing today in his presentation. He has authored 4 books. They include Over the Top of the World, Crossing Antarctica, North to the Pole, and Saving Earth. Please put your hands together for our featured guest speaker, Will Steger.
Good afternoon, and thanks everybody for coming. I want to thank Dennis Kim for setting up my presentation here today. And I have 30 minutes here. I'll keep us on track at 1:45. And I always get the question of how do you become an explorer, and I think I'll first answer that. First of all, everything started right here for me. This is the home that I was raised in 72nd and Logan, actually right down the tracks here. And I was part of American Dream. My dad fought in the Pacific, came back, started his own business, raised 9 kids. And my dad was an entrepreneur, so his business, he basically supported us on his ideas. And 6 of us were 6 boys. I was second to the top, in number 8 in line. And 6 of us lived upstairs in that long room we called the dormitory. The 3 girls were in one of the bedrooms downstairs, and the parents, of course, the other bedroom. We had 1 bathroom. And in the morning for school, I remember we each had 4 minutes in the bathroom to do whatever. And we had a regular system like that going through. That got me in shape for expeditions and, putting up close quarters. But it was really, my luck in my life was really being born to my parents. A very great relationship, great parents. But they gave us, we had very few rules as young kids. We were expected to have a certain grade point average in school. Of course, if we got in trouble with the law, that was it for everything. And other than that, we were free to do what we wanted to do, as long as we paid for it. And then so my first book that I read was Adventures of Huck Finn, and I think that inspired many young children, and it definitely inspired me because it kind of set my life on where I wanted to be. And at that time, I wanted to be Huck, and I wanted to go down this Mississippi River, and I found out this Mississippi goes to New Orleans. I researched it in the encyclopedias. If you remember that, that's the knowledge base for my generation at least. And then when I was 12 years old, I told my dad, I said I was going to go down, I want to go down the river to New Orleans with a boat. He said, well, you can do that, but you have to have a new boat. So then, I was an entrepreneur myself, but I saved my money from caddying out here at Minnesota Valley and cutting lawns, and I bought an old boat when I was 13. Fixed it up over the winter time, and then traded it in, and this process went on until I was 15, and with a signed loan from my dad, had a new boat. I had a 2-year debt on my hands, and I recruited my brother Tom, who was 17, and we went down to New Orleans and spent a bunch of time down there, and then we came up. The hard part of that trip was coming back upriver. That was actually my first and last motorized adventure, because we had to call several times for money because the gas tank was taking all of our money. Our food we had to scrounge along the way down. But I started on non-motorized sports, and I was always as a kid very interested in climbing. I used to climb everything, flagpoles. I don't know if you remember the history of the Nagley sign 40 years ago. I don't have a picture of that, but we used to climb that, the ski jump. And I got all my pictures sort of my visions came from National Geographic, and that kind of, I wrapped my dreams around those photographs, and climbing was one of them. In 1960, I bought a hemp rope out of the hardware store, and at age 16 here, we started climbing. We did traverses. By the time I was 17, I had a license, which then I was able to drive out west. And along with out west, I got in with better climbers, started to learn more, plus better equipment. And my goal was to get into the large, the higher elevation mountains. I approached mountains as wilderness. Rock climbing, I really like doing rock climbing, but it wasn't my main sport. Rock climbing was almost like, to learn a culture, you need to learn the language. And so I had to have these skills in rock climbing. So I perfected my skills there. Overhangs, and by the time I was 18, I was doing wall climbs. And this was an incredible experience for me, because for the first time on the walls like this, I pushed my edge. My edge is like when you get on that edge, climbing, for example, where you're almost at the limit of your skills. You're really almost freaking out because you think you're going to fall and die. But at that point, you really have to have your act together. Not just physically, but mentally, actually to a degree spiritually. But I sought that edge. I really liked what it was. It wasn't an adrenaline rush for me. It's more of an experience. And I remember after my first climb like that, I came back, and I was really frightened up there, and I was almost paralyzed. But I learned to overcome that. And when I came off the climb, I actually wanted to do more. More because I craved that experience of pushing that edge, and that edge is for myself. All my life is where the learning process has been. The way I was raised was not to see barriers, because I basically had this freedom. I had to work to do climbing, get the hardware. So I pushed these limits, and I wanted to live a life of experience and awareness and so forth, and that's how I pursued everything that I've done, other than more than just expeditions. By the time I was 20, I joined an expedition in the Peruvian Andes, and we did 3 20,000-foot first ascents, and that was really an incredible thing for me, especially being with the talent that I was with. I was a neophyte at climbers. I just happened to be with good climbers. And then as a Minnesota kid, which is natural to us, is water and being out in that water. Although I pushed it a little step further, because in the 60s, early 60s, people didn't even know what a kayak was. Of course, I saw kayaks in the National Geographic, and I always thought the kayak would probably be a better craft because it has several advantages. Is that when you're in water like this, in a canoe, of course, you would easily tip over, and then with a canoe, of course, you can flip over. So this gave me the advantage of approaching very long river trips. This is the age 19. I was in Jasper, Alberta, which is in southern Canadian Rockies. A friend of mine, Ole Olsen from Edina, that I went to school with in Benilde High School, I recruited Ole, and we left here at Jasper, and we paddled 2,600 miles north through 3 rivers to the Arctic Ocean. And then when we reached the ocean, we had a problem because we had to get home now, and it wasn't a time of where you just kind of fly back. There was the Richardson Mountains, the northernmost extension of the Rockies, and that we managed to get over and portage over and get down on the other side. And then we canoed south into Alaska, and we got out at Fairbanks, Alaska, end of August. We really had to get back to college. Was starting, I think it was around the 10th at that time. Then we hitchhiked back. We separated. But all my life I wanted to live in the wilderness, and so on that hitchhike back, I really started thinking about what I've seen. This was a coming of age trip. So when I got back, I went to northern Minnesota and started looking for land. Got a car. The day I got back, I went north, knocked on doors, bars and hotels or whatever was around, people's houses. I thought land was going to be for sale all over. There's so much wilderness, but it must be for sale. It wasn't. But I ended up in Ely, Minnesota, where I found a realtor, and I ended up buying property on this lake here. It's 3 miles from the nearest road, which was exactly what I was looking for. I was looking for something that was 2 lakes off the road, so 2 miles across here, and I could move supplies or canoe it, portage in, and then into that lake. And then it's there where I started to build, which turned out to be my home. a cabin. Now, being a suburban kid, in our household, it was pretty hard to find a hammer or a screwdriver. But again, I was an innate builder as a child, and I had this desire, and again, I had the freedom to pursue that. And I did see a lot of log cabins. I checked a book out of the library for some information. And then I went about, at age 19, I started building this cabin. And then my goal back then, I always had a vocation for education ever since I was a child. I knew where I was going in terms of my vocation. I never really had to wander off too far. And then so it was real important for me to get my teaching and my degrees under my belt before I moved to the wilderness. So I graduated at St. Thomas with a degree in geology, biology with a teaching certificate, and then I taught in Richfield for 3 years to get the experience in the classroom. I didn't see myself as a classroom teacher. I didn't like, as a kid, I really hated school and the confinement and all that. But I knew I was a teacher, and I knew it was important to get that formal experience to do what I wanted to do. And then as I taught, I worked for my master's at the University of St. Thomas. And then at the age of 25 in 1970, I had my master's degree, and then I moved out of the city. I had nothing against the city. I had tons of friends down here, but I moved to start a whole new life in the wilderness. And when you're isolated in the wilderness, you have to keep in mind you don't have a car or a vehicle or a bobcat or anything to move things around. You have to carry it. When you drop a tree for a log cabin, you need a lot of people to help you. So I've always had lots of great friends. Being 25, living alone in the wilderness, what do you do for your social life? And so having a community of friends around me, and later a school, and then also a livelihood and then my goal of my whole life was to be self-sufficient, which you now call sustainability. I think self-sufficiency is a basic American value. It always has for me. I know in my parents' generation it was that way too. For myself, I always wanted to clear land in the wilderness, build up the soil, plant. I built a root cellar, an ice house, a workshop, all over a period of a 10-year period. But that was, like 16-hour, that's farm work, 16 hours of work a day until the freezes up and snow falls. That kind of slows you down. But during the 70s, I was able to build up my homestead. I continued teaching the methods that I was learning, the gardening, how to make all the boards here are all chainsaw cut, how to sharpen tools and so forth. But it was really the dogs that changed my life. I was very fortunate when I first moved up north. I hitchhiked out to Outward Bound, which was a young school at that time. Outward Bound was only 5 years old. And they were starting up for the first time their winter courses. And I hit it at the right time. I talked to the program director, hit it off with him, and he hired me on the spot. And so I worked for their 2 winners there on their courses. And for me, it was a paradigm because it put me in touch with outdoor education, something I didn't even know existed. And I really excelled in that because I had the skills. I had my vocation of need of teaching, but I was in the outdoors. And I really found my direction there at that particular time. But I'm a very bad employee because I always have my own ideas. So after 2 years, I left Outward Bound on good terms. I did tell them I would compete with them someday. And I started my own winter school. And back then, nobody did dog teams. Dog teams they raced with dogs. And then this enabled me to build up an incredible school. I had the ability to develop a lot of ideas, a lot of programs. I worked a lot with youth at risk, J-terms. These are medical interns at the university or at St. Luke's Hospital in Duluth. Works men's and women's courses, and all this type of work had never been done before, and it was just incredible. It was a great business at the time. Although the dogs, though, were also another avenue in my mind. Once I had a great dog team together, and it took 5, 6, 7 years to get a great dog team because the dogs kind of taught me along the way. But once I had a good dog team together doing the school, my mind started drifting off to expeditions again. And then back in 1982, when I was like 9 years into my school, I basically turned my school over to a good friend of mine that still runs it today at Wintergreen. And I was making a good living, and I was self-sufficient, but I just had other dreams than that. I had particularly a vision that I've carried through is as an educator, I was reaching about 100 people a year, which was a fair number, but I really thought I wasn't making an impact with my life at that time. And I had this idea of doing a wilderness center. It was just an idea at that time. And then I headed off and did dog sleds. And the dogs then brought me all sorts of opportunities. I was able to do the last of the geographical firsts. I did the unsupported to the North Pole in 1986, and I remembered, I think, mostly in Minnesota for that expedition. I crossed Antarctica 89, 90, 3,700 miles, the first traverse, the longest possible traverse, across the Arctic Ocean. I had a long relation with National Geographic. I did a number of articles with them and so forth. But the expeditions then led me into online education, and I was able to, working with St. Thomas Hamlin University, University of Minnesota, I was able to bring my adventures, the curiosity of the adventures, into the classroom through the internet. And we plugged that curiosity in with programs that dealt with in the Arctic, in particular climate and the environment up north. And these were very successful, really fulfilled my need on education. This is what changed my life, actually, and I taught climate change in my classes in the late 60s, so I wasn't a newbie to climate. I had always studied it, but the climate change, the rapid change we've had, especially in the last 30 years, is what woke me up. This is a chart from I'll just briefly describe it. It was from an ice core in eastern Antarctica. They drill down. It's almost like drilling through the bore in a tree, and you take that bore out and you count the ears in a tree. The ice core is similar. They can go back and they get data, all sorts of different types of data of past climate. And this is the past climate for 400,000 years. And this is carbon dioxide, which is measured in parts per million. And you see this is a normal variation. You get these highs and lows. And at the height here, we have warmer weather like we've had now. And in the low periods like this, you have about 2 kilometers of ice here over Minnesota. Now, this is caused by the natural variation of the Earth's orbit. The Earth is elliptical, so every 110,000 years it's closer. It also wobbles back and forth every 40,000. So if you mix all these variations, you get this natural thing. This has been going on millions and millions of years, and all of a sudden, in the Industrial Revolution, you start seeing this rage. This thing is way off the chart. I mean, we're literally up here. In the last 30 years, we've brought the CO2 higher than it's been since the beginning of the industrial age. And this is definitely caused, there's no question about it in the scientific community. It's caused by carbon dioxide, predominantly from fossil fuels. And that is carbon dioxide is a heat-trapping gas. 50% of that stays in the atmosphere for 100 years. It's like putting sweaters on your body. It keeps the heat in. And it's a very serious problem. But and then I'm showing this is a closer range, 2015 through 1960. You see this range here. I'm showing you this because in 1990, we reached 350 parts per million, which was the tipping point. At that level, the scientists predicted the ice on the planet would start melting. And that was the beginning of what we're seeing here. And I was an eyewitness to all these changes. In 2002, the Larsen ice shelf, a huge ice shelf, 150 miles across in Antarctica, broke off. I mean, it caught all the scientists off guard. Definitely a climate-related event. It was the first kind of hairbringer of what was going to happen. When that happened, I saw the reality, and then I moved down here to Minneapolis then to work on climate. I'll show you just briefly. This ice shelf is right here, and this is the ice shelf here that you'll see here in a second that disintegrates, and 2002 here. And this 150 miles, across here. This is satellite photos over a 4-week period in January of 2002. And you can see these pieces here are the size of Rhode Island. And you see this rapid breakup. This whole thing broke up in a small period of time. Greenland, which is the ice cap, between North America and northwestern Europe. Greenland's the second largest ice cap. I've been on that twice, north, south, east, west. And here you see in terms of climate, the red areas here are the warming areas. And a normal year was back in '92 where you would see thaws up to about 1,000 feet in July and August. And you can see the thawing area moving up in 2002 about 4,000 feet. And then look at the difference here in 3 years alone, it's way up. And then in 2012, it was incredible. It thawed right up to the top to 10,300 feet. I mean, this never has happened. And these alarming signs that what you're happening in Greenland is you're getting water on the ice. It flows off, but it flows down through crevasses, and then it lubricates the glaciers, so the ice cap, and the ice cap flows real quickly. We have glaciers in Greenland now moving at 15 miles a year because of this, and we're getting, the sea level is rising. So this whole, and then we're seeing it at first in around 2006, 7 until 2010, we weren't seeing changes down here at this level. But then in the last 6, 7 years, it's become obvious to anyone that is looking around outside or watching TV. This is the Pakami fire, big fire in Ely. 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, that it ran 18 miles in one day. Fortunately, it ran into the wilderness, so it would have went the other direction. It would have been a catastrophic like we had in California. And then, ironically enough, 3 months later after this fire, they had the biblical flood in Duluth, 17 inches of rain one afternoon, $250 million worth of infrastructure damage. And then, of course, you can't deny the droughts. Minnesota has been spared. We've been very fortunate, but the drought is intensifying more and more if you're watching that. So I formed, at that early day, I formed a nonprofit called the Steger Foundation, which is now called Climate Generation. And that nonprofit works exclusively with climate. We work in K-12 education, curriculum. We work in a lot of youth organizing. I've always mentored. And then we work a lot of public convenings all around the state. And then I work a lot in policy, climate and energy policy throughout the state. And you sometimes think, okay, in climate people, I get the question, what can I do? I'm just one individual. Well, all of us have a huge sphere of influence. When this was happening, I thought, okay, what can I do? What am I best at? Well, I moved to the city and I started with education. That was my strength, organizing like in expeditions. And then I worked on up to Mark Dayton here. Governor Plenty really gave us the initial policies that started the clean energy economy. I approach the solutions to climate change education, of course, but primarily through economics, because by building jobs in industries that are going to take carbon out of at the same time of creating jobs, that's a interest that spread both aisles of Democrat and Republicans. You can't communicate if you're just concerned about a whale or something. You can preach to your choir all you want, but nothing's going to happen. But dollars and cents in the economy is a very strong. We've created over tens of thousands of jobs already in Minnesota, what we did not have 10 years ago in these industries. The solar, we're electrifying our grid, we're electrifying our economy. The solar car is just about ready to boom. The economy is going to draw that in. It's just going to be a lot cheaper running that. It's going to be cleaner. So there is a lot of help, and but I worked in that direction through Climate Gen. But then my true vision I had, though, was what I worked for most of my life in the last 40 years was building the center in the wilderness. And when I crossed Antarctica in 1989-90, I had 7 months of time on my hands, and the challenge of doing crossing the ice caps it's physically a lot of cold. Getting up to the ice caps, there's a lot of crevasses, a lot of danger, but a large majority of it is just plain boredom, as you might say, monotony, day after day after day after day, month after month, the same rhythm, everything, nothing changes, the sun never sets, never rises. And young people don't deal with that too well. Young people deal with the adventure side of, but so it's a unique challenge, and everybody handles it differently. In myself, I went into the design mode, where I kind of got out the logical thinking of our everyday relationships, balancing your budget and whatever the personal is, and I got into the design mode. And at that point, I actually designed the center that I was going to build, and then when I came back, I started building it. My inspiration came, my motto has always been Camp David. I always liked that idea of Camp David, where you take higher level people. My center is really for decision makers, teachers developing programs. It's not just for the everyday student. It's not a nature preserve, but it's a place where you go to figure things out, because you use that unique setting of the wilderness. Camp David is unique, and it's not a wilderness setting, but it's very similar. It's where some very, very big topics, the agreement here, monumental here during the Carter era. And then also the time of contemplation, serious decisions that you have to make, serious decisions maybe your company has to make, or in policy. You might bring up Republicans, Democrats to get common ground on an issue that you're just not talking with. And I always felt that a small convening center in the center, in the wilderness, with a great community, immersed in a good community, wilderness community, was an answer. That's something I could do. And my experience is, this is not my place. This is a retreat center up on Lake of the Woods, Oberholster's, Millard Island. I took my staff up there 6 years ago to kind of get our original thinking on this center together. We kind of modeled it we didn't model around this model, but this model here actually fit our way of deciding. My center, as you'll see, is a little more elegant than sitting around the fire. This is what the building that I built in the last 30 years. I built all this on my own. I don't come from wealth. I work, and in addition to working for this, I support educational projects. And this kept me really motivated for the last 30 years, because you get, again, as you know, when you're building a company, when you're getting against the wall and you have to produce, that's where you really produce. You don't produce a lot. You always can slack a little bit, but it's when you have to do it, and you're motivated to be creative. That's where it's really the best. And all that is handling your stress too, because you can push yourself in the corner and you can stress yourself literally to death. But you also, and handling my stress is actually, that's one reason I'm successful on expeditions. When I'm under stressful situations there, which are physical, and the physical on the expedition is not really the challenge. It's the dynamics within the group. If the group's growing well, it's heaven. But you can get something going in the group, somebody competing with you within a group of 6 under the worst conditions. Those are very tough areas, and I've learned through my business experience. My whole life is one. I don't like take an expedition like a vacation. That's part of my life. But building this, I'm a nonprofit, the Will Steger Wilderness Center, 401c3. We've been a nonprofit for about 6 years. Starting last year, I was able to raise half the budget through the center to get some of the finances off. This year, hopefully, we got about 8%. This is the building here. It's 5 floors. I always thought too, I wanted to do kind of a masterpiece where I worked with other craftspeople, and the craftspeople that I worked with were almost always people in their 50s and 60s that were really good in their field, but they wanted something to challenge themselves, and they wanted to be part of something bigger than themselves in a legacy. So I had all this great maturity and this talent. And when you put that together in your building, I wanted to do a building that even a person that might be a little slow would feel it around them. And to create a building of presence like that. And a building that when you look at it and when you're inside of it, and I've seen this, where people actually see possibilities in themselves. They don't look like, oh, Will Steger. That's not the way to go. They see possibilities. And so it was challenging building this, but it was a real opportunity to try many things. We do everything like you would call self-sufficient but sustainable. All of our building materials are 95% of our building materials are either off the land or with windblown. Yeah, windblown. With the global warming, we're getting more windstorms, so there's a lot of wood available. And then we also do a lot of recycled wood from Chicago and so forth. And we mill it. We have a great shop that we built over the years. We built everything from furniture to windows to cabinetry. You make it. We don't buy anything out of a store that way. And you're also saving a tremendous amount on your budget that way. You know, we're doing sustainable, but we're doing it for at least 2/3 the price. If you were to hire things out and buy it, wouldn't be possible. And I did a lot of tile work, and it was for me as a designer. It was an opportunity to do work like this. This is the main conference room on the first floor. I do stained glass with wood. I always wanted to do stained glass. I couldn't get past the soldering stage of the smoke and the fumes. But then I realized that because I am a woodworker, and working on refined detail routers, I was able to mill out what you call these cames. So I was able to do wood, and I've taught that trade to a couple other people that work with me. And I've never seen wood like this, but it's a real opportunity for an artist that would want to wrap their life around it. Again, all the windows, everything. We didn't go to Marvin Windows. We did our own stuff. We did lots of work, stone. I always loved stone. It's great work. It's quiet. To me, stone is one of the best teachers. And I worked with groups over the years, masters. Jim Sullivan, for example, I've got 3 masters that are in their 60s that are old-time masters, stone bee. Great. All these craftspeople that work for me are teachers. They're mentors. They're not just good at their crafts. They're really good with teaching, and especially with young people. And then over the years, I've read, used to run a 6-week resident program around stone, teaching stonework to other people. It wasn't just for trades, although some of our young people are working now on their own on the trade, because there's a big demand for stone work like this, but it's a teacher. Stone, within a day, all the students are doing their own, and the mentor may check in once in a while. It's a huge opportunity for women, people of color, for people in poverty. I work with a fantastic project with Summit Academy on the north side, which is trades. And Summit is a way of bringing people out of poverty by training them, in this case, carpentry skills, and then placing them. They have over a 90% placement if you can get through the 20-week course. It's a remarkable. People that make $3,000–5,000 a year, if you can imagine that, living on that, they're starting off at $24 an hour. They're guaranteed that if they get through. And here, it's the motivation of being in the wilderness, and also it's always the community of working together. The smiles tell you everything here, and the faces. And then already we're not a full-time running, but I do have some gatherings. This is my climate generation youth, our youth leaders here. They were coming up to organize, to figure out what their legislative agenda was for the next year. These kids are very powerful with legislators. They're very fair and even-handed. Like if they go with a Republican office, meeting with a Republican, the representative might think they're going to get a fight, but no, they don't. They get very considerate, respectful people that know the facts and know the issues, and that will, if necessary, gently guide the person into the right direction. And they're very powerful. Mark Dayton, Mark's there for us anywhere, but the youth, when he comes in, he just relaxes. He usually gives us about 10 minutes, and then he usually cancels his whole schedule for the morning. But the young people, and this younger generation is credible. It's not just I'm not an old person just talking the usual line, the younger generation. These young people are geared up with the right skills. They're going to need to face the opportunities and the huge challenges that lay ahead. I work with Dunwoody. I teach a course in architecture in the fall with a friend of mine, Molly Reichard, who's a full-time teacher. So we have access to Dunwoody. We're doing all our site plans and architectural plans and that. Rather than having an architect just do it, we're doing it. It's a part of a program that you're teaching. And these young people some of these people will be with us for 40 years. I mean, I've been at this for almost 50 years, and I have people coming back. And I work in partnerships all the time. I mean, why reinvent the wheel? This is a partnership for our first microgrid with Cummins, diesel generators, They're almost the size of 3M, to get an idea of their size. They have a small plant of 5,000 here in North St. Paul. But we have Cummings, the University of St. Thomas Engineering, several others helped us here to the brain power. For our first microgrid, we're of course off the grid. I mean, my biggest compromise was putting a road in to do the center. And, but we're off grid by purpose. We would never have a power line in. But now we run 90% of everything, and this is just it's the largest microgrid in the States, but it's a small microgrid to where we're going to go. But we run almost all our shop materials from solar. And then last couple of slides here is Dunwoody. We're going over schematic designs for the new dining hall that we're doing here. And always the relationship, mentoring. When you're learning, you bring. Rotary is such a. I mean, that's the reason I'm here, guys. You work a lot with youth, and it's all about that mentorship, passing on the knowledge, living your example through younger people. You always have to have your example. First of all, in your thought. I mean, there's too many people that, like football players, and they're an example somehow. But you have to take it beyond just the movements of your example. You have to set the example, and only you know your thinking. But by being positive and having goodness as a core value of yourself, which is I see your principles in Rotary. This is what it's about. And I'll be here at the table signing my book, Crossing Antarctica, poster. The proceeds of this goes towards expedition that I'm leaving on in 4 months for the resupply. I have the Steger Wilderness Center.org here. If you want to follow my expedition or learn more or donate to the center, you can, or just Google out Steger and you'll see the Wilderness Center. And then this is my personal email. I have one kind of an ask or an advertisement at the Steger Center, which we're a nonprofit 401c3. We're looking for an accountant that has financial skills and particularly a perfect job for a retirement person that's looking for a purpose because it's about it would be a 1-year commitment, and it's not something where you meet and you think like a normal board member. It's really an action thing because we're building up the center. We have to get our financials. We're starting our business plan and our strategic planning. And for that, you've got to look back where you were 4 years, and you have to project, and that's all an accounting process. So if you know a friend or anything that is looking for a purpose and wants to be part of a great community, and we have work at great people, I'll guarantee you a good time, and it'll be fun to get to know that person. So Steger, stegerw@gmail.com is my contact information. I think I might have enough time for one question, or do we? Okay, just cut me off, and if there are questions, I can give it here. Yes.
What do you see around, besides the people that you work with, that give you the most hope for the future?
Yeah, well, the most question is what your most hope. Well, of course, the youth, of course. I mean, I draw my energy. I'm able to work my long hours because of, when you're around young people. And the problem with our generation, when you get older, you don't get an opportunity to mentor in that, and that's very important. My hope, my basic hope is in the human spirit, because I've seen that in expeditions when it's a raw survival situation where it doesn't look like you're going to exist or survive. The strength of a community, especially, not just a personal human spirit. And if there's an evolution or a goodness or a God in this planet, there is, and I think that is echoed in the human spirit. We have a division in this country, unfortunately. So in climate, it's hard to put a man to the moon or a person to the moon if you don't have the whole country on board. It's not like that in the rest of the world, fortunately, but unfortunately we're really losing out on the economics because that's the way the world is going. So my faith is in technology. We have up the technology right there. It's not like we're lacking technology at all. It's at our fingertips. But again, the economy. I see the economy moving, and and it's really hard moving sometimes on the conservative side. For some reason, they don't buy into even the clean energy jobs. But that is going to change because the economy is economy, jobs are jobs. Even in Louisiana, they're buying into wind farms. Do you know why? Because they're cheaper than coal. They didn't want to do wind farms because that was too political. But then they looked at their bottom line. Coal is here, wind is here, wind wins. And so economy will I think, win over our economic situation. And we get tied in and too much, I think, into our news, and it'd probably be best if you could go a month without listening to anything. I don't think any of you are strong enough to do that, and I would challenge you at doing it. But I really don't think any of you could do that because you think you have to be informed. But you know, the news cycle is it's aligning you with the people that you think. It's just, but you know, you have to get beyond that, I think, to get your positive side back. So. My belief was really in the American dream. I think that's still possible. Right now, we're down, but I still believe in the Constitution, and I believe in goodness above all. And you know, my hope is that we can get beyond politics in many different levels, and I think we can do that. I mean, I hope we don't have to push ourselves over the edge to reach that, because that's how most people function. They wait until there's a crisis, and then they'll react. You always should survive it by doing it before the crises. So, yeah.
I was interested in your slide on Greenland because there was recently an article that had another concern. As the ice caps melt, apparently they've been holding down the volcanic activity underneath.
Yeah.
And once that pressure comes off, they're concerned that there could be some massive volcanic eruptions like we had 3-4 years ago, but many more.
Yeah, it could possibly. Again, the pressure on that could have something to do with it, but volcanoes and earthquakes, again, keep in mind, most of that's geologic. It has nothing to do with how we're mistreating the world, but it's a possibility. It's a wild card. Many different things could happen because we've tampered with something now. The genie's getting out of the bottle. So there can be some really surprises, and that could be a possibility, but I wouldn't lose sleep over it though.
I understand that as the tundra is heating up, it's releasing a lot of the carbon dioxide that's been stored,
Yep.
and it's bubbling up at a rate that can you talk about that, or do you know anything about that?
Yeah, of course, that's a scary thing. Tundra, the frozen tundra, if you ever look at a map of the top of the world, all of Siberia, Alaska, northern Canada, that's all frozen. It's basically frozen swamp. So when what happens when you're walking in a swamp in the summer, what do you smell? That's methane. So when it's frozen, it's inert, it's locked up. So when the swamp melts, what happens? The methane comes up, and that's a major problem. And all the more that the need to really react quickly. But I don't want to leave it on a negative note, but we are adults, and we should be able to face real issues maturely and with solutions. You don't have any other choice. I mean, if you can put your head in the sand, if you're young, you don't have a choice because you can't put your head in the sand all your life. But by getting discouraged, the great thing about the solutions to climate, it's related to social engagement. And it is happening. If you look at even the metropolitan area in the last 5-7 years, all the biking, all the hiking, all the organic foods, all this community-based thing, the youth are all over it. I mean, they have a strong community, and our communities even is becoming. So it is a social engagement, because you can't face hardships and difficult situations. You can face them alone, but it's really tough. But if you don't face them alone, you always go to your friends. So one last question. I'll keep the answer short if there isn't one. Yes?
So your huck fin youth, which was fabulous, you've got to admit that simply couldn't happen today. How would you suggest that the youth today, at least following that example or following that mindset or thought of challenging themselves, tapping the unknown,
Yeah.
paddling down the Mississippi
Yeah.
to New Orleans. How would you suggest they do that today?
Yeah, with the younger person, it's like an older person. It's basically following their dreams. First of all, I was allowed the freedom to follow within, and I think a lot of younger people do that. You have to, and the challenges aren't necessarily what a young person take on. A younger person might not be have this desire to go to the North Pole or crossing Antarctica, but there is a lot of exploration and challenges and technologies and many different things. That'll be endless as long as we are human spirits and always developing. So there's all sorts of talents and directions to go. But I think for a younger person is to allow the younger people to have their own thing. We don't need 80-year-old politicians telling the young people where they should be. And the young people know where they want to be. And I think allowing them to do that, they have the tools within themselves to, for their own world. And a lot of them are explorers in different ways. A lot of them are active in the outdoors, but that's not for everything. So thanks a lot, Terry. Thanks, everybody.
Now, Mr. Steger is going to be at the table to my right, and he'll have some books and some posters available. So if you'd like to continue that interaction and continue to ask questions, you'll be more than welcome to do so immediately after the meeting. We'd like to thank Will Steger for engaging the public to foster climate literacy in action with the goal of building a more equitable and sustainable future for all. Will, as a token of our appreciation for speaking today, the Bloomington Noon Rotary Club will be making a donation to support the Steger Wilderness Center in Ely. So thank you for that.